if mental health is a concern for you, then I really want you to watch this video to learn more about how you can support your mental health through your diet and improve your well-being. So last week I was listening to Dr Rangan Chattergee's podcast called Feel Better, Live More, and he was interviewing Dr Georgia Ede, who is a psychiatrist who's been practicing for approximately 25 years in the United States. And recently, in the last few years, I would say she's been delving more into the nutritional aspects of how to support her clients with their mental health, because she's been, prescribing medication and what have you over the years, but not making a big enough dent in helping them overcome the challenges that they're facing with their mental health. And so after all the research and experimentation that she's done over the last 2 years, she's finally released a book called, I think it's called Change Your Mind, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind, something like that. Either way, I'll put the information in the notes alongside this video so you can research it for yourself. But in this podcast, she shared 5 key tips dietary tips for improving your mental health. And of course, I'm fascinated by this. This is something that I've been working on for years, probably about 25 years. I've been concerned about diet and health and how we can improve our health through our diet. So I was all ears and curious to see what she was going to share. And I want to talk about what she shared now, because I want to explain my thinking around why I think her methodology works, but then also what's some of the issues that might arise as a result of using her method. So let's start. So she mentioned 5 things to avoid to improve your brain health if you want to use diet as a way to help stabilize your condition. Now, the first one she mentioned was getting rid of refined carbohydrates. So that's refined sugars, refined grain products, flours, cereals, all those kinds of things. Basically, nearly every type of highly processed food contains some kind of refined carbohydrate in it. And so it's really a no-brainer that we should be avoiding and eliminating these types of foods in our diet, especially refined carbohydrates, which have a really big impact on our insulin levels and our blood sugar levels, and these have an impact on our brain health. And if our blood sugar is out of balance, we know that it's going to affect the way we think and the way we feel. If you know anything about sugar spikes, you would know that if you have too much sugar or a large quantity of sugar, and when I say large quantity, I just mean basically, a glass of juice or a can of soft drink or something like that has a high concentration of refined carbohydrate in it, you're going to get a sugar high and followed by a sugar low. And so that's going to fluctuate and affect your moods as well. So avoiding refined carbohydrates, like I said, is a no-brainer. The second thing she mentioned to avoid was refined vegetable oils. So things like soybean oil, sunflower oil, canola oil. And a lot of these oils are present in those highly processed foods that a lot of people eat. They're also present in things like deep fried foods. When you go to a takeaway or a restaurant, they're using oil that is highly refined to deep fry foods. And I know a lot of restaurants and takeaway places use deep frying as a method to prepare food because it's quick, it tastes good. We love that oily texture or fatty texture in our mouth. They add a lot of salt to it as well. And people love that hit of fat and salt together. So the thing with these oils is, even though they come from natural sources like soybeans, sunflower seeds to make sunflower oil, that type of thing. Even canola, is a plant that they extract oil from. So it's the extraction process, that refining process, that is really detrimental to that end product. And so we're not actually eating a natural food. Other oils are great, extra virgin olive oil, cold pressed sesame oil, things like that, things that are actually done either organically or cold pressed, extra virgin, that type of thing. Those oils are great to use in small quantities in our regular cooking, but just avoiding those really highly refined oils, and especially when they appear in highly processed foods and in those takeaway meals that we might get when we want to eat on the run. Okay, the third thing she mentioned was alcohol. And again, this is pretty much a no-brainer. If you suffer from a mental health problem and you're drinking alcohol regularly, there's a really good chance that alcohol is contributing to your mental health problem. And perhaps you're even using that alcohol as a way to deal with your mental health issues. So, we might find that we're drinking alcohol to help us feel better, but the effects of drinking alcohol actually have a really negative effect on our body biochemistry, especially with our liver, and not to mention what goes on inside our head. So avoiding alcohol as much as possible, abstaining, having, a alcohol-free lifestyle. And I did a podcast with a friend of mine, Mish Wright, who talked about, quitting mummy wine time and the impact that had on her brain health as well. So check that out. I can put a link in the notes here for this video too. So alcohol. So we've got refined carbohydrates, refined oils, and alcohol there. So they're the top three things that she mentioned. And I think we can all agree that if we want to improve our health and our mental health, then just by doing those three things, we're well on the way to achieving great things, great improvements in how we're feeling on a regular basis. Now, the other two things that she mentioned were grains, like whole grains, as something to avoid. And then number 5 was legumes. So if you're a whole food eater like I am, and you hear someone say, well, you shouldn't be eating whole grains and you shouldn't be eating legumes, then alarm bells are going to start ringing inside your head probably. But I wanted to hear her out. I wanted to understand what her perspective was, why she thought these things were important to remove. And she did speak about how many people who are suffering from mental health issues have this thing called insulin resistance. So basically, whenever they eat a carbohydrate, their body has to produce insulin to assimilate that carbohydrate, turning it into glucose, glycogen, storing in the liver, etc. But because they're so overloaded already, because they're eating refined carbohydrates, that eating more grain, even if it's a whole grain, is going to have an effect on their body biochemistry. And I can see where she's coming from. I can see and understand that that would be a problem. She also talked about how these grains are basically seeds of plants, which is true. And because they're seeds, their nutrients inside of them aren't readily bioavailable because the plants actually put in inhibitors, like growth inhibitors and stuff, to prevent them from sprouting until they're ready to be placed into the ground and grow. So ideally, when we eat animals, humans eat grains, we chew them. Maybe they don't get chewed properly. We excrete them with fertilizer and then they can grow, assuming they're still intact. So basically, that's one of her reasons as well. She basically said that, she can't see a reason why anyone should be eating grains. And I would have to disagree with that statement. I think grains have been part of the evolution of humans on this planet for millennia. Each culture has a grain or a type of grain or a seed that is part of their regular diet that grows in their climate. So I think grains do have an importance. If we're dealing with mental health issues, then perhaps looking at grains and preparing them in a way that is more beneficial for our digestive system, for our insulin resistance, and balancing things out. We can sprout seeds, grains, and we can also, so soaking is the first step. So soaking them first to help release those growth inhibitors, and then sprouting afterwards. So, it might take a couple of days to prepare these grains to get them ready before we cook them, but that is a way of introducing them so that they become more digestible for us, and the nutrients inside them also support us better. Now, when she talked about legumes as well, similar argument about the fact that legumes are, again, seeds, and they need to be sprouted or soaked to to be able to be cooking them, but I can't recall exactly what she said about beans and legumes and why they should be avoided, but you get the gist. So she was then promoting what was called a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, where these people, she did a test with another researcher, and they got some people who had severe mental health problems, and they put them on a 6 or 8 week program where they fed them a ketogenic diet. So that is a diet high in animal products and meat, dairy, eggs, that kind of thing. Very, little to no grains or carbohydrates, and specific vegetables as well to support that. Probably no fruit, because fruit again is high in fructose, which is a carbohydrate, so contains sugar, so avoiding those. And they got excellent results from that trial of 6 to 8 weeks on this ketogenic diet, where people were able to reduce their medication afterwards, even get off certain medications, or even go into remission of their condition. And that got me thinking. It got me thinking about, well, how is that possible, and why would that be beneficial? So I wanted to put on my macrobiotic lens and see what might come up. And it got me thinking about, okay, so let's generalize this for a moment. So imagine we have a client or a person who has a mental health condition. Okay, they're on medication, they're potentially overweight, they're eating highly refined foods, their diet isn't very good, they may not be exercising very much. So what we can see immediately with this person is that they have a very yin condition, and they also have a very yin diet. So when we look at yin and yang, we look at yin being, more expanded. Taking drugs like medications can be more yin. We might be eating more refined food, more yin. Maybe eating lots of refined carbohydrates, very yin. So this person has a very yin condition. And so when we want to treat this person from a macrobiotic perspective, we then need to give them more yang to create some sort of balance. And with any diet or dietary change that people go on, it's about removing the things that are causing the problem. And so you might have experienced this yourself, where you wanted to lose a couple of kilos, so you stopped eating grains, maybe you stopped eating bread, maybe you went gluten-free, I don't know, and you instantly notice changes taking place. So same thing applies. So when we take out all the bad stuff that we've been eating for a long period of time that's creating this overly yin condition, and we replace it with yang foods, meat, eggs, dairy, cheese, that type of thing, we're going to see a switch happening, a rebalancing, so to speak. We've gone from extreme yin, and we're going to increase our intake of extreme yang, and so we're going to see the scales tip the other way. And we get to a point perhaps where there's some balance and people's conditions improve. And so that's my understanding of her approach, is going from, and she doesn't even know necessarily that she's doing this yin and yang balance. She doesn't see it that way because maybe she doesn't know about this way of looking at people on a holistic level. So, add in a bit of exercise, that's also yang. Add in some other elements of life that will create a person to become more yang, then you're going to get these results. But my question to her then is, how long does a person need to go on this ketogenic diet to then, before it starts to go the other way? So if we've been eating yin for a long time, and we're very yin, and that's been the case for a long time, years even, and then we start to go more yang by increasing our yang diet, so more meat, dairy, cheese, etc., there's going to be a point where if we keep increasing the yang side of things and completely letting go of all the yin stuff, where we're going to get out of balance again. And then there's going to be health conditions arising as a result of the extreme yang that we've been consuming. So once we get to that point, it's important to stop and listen to our bodies and to know when to start introducing those other foods. And we want to be introducing good yin and good yang foods. So we want to narrow perhaps the diet from these extremes, so becoming to more whole foods. And she was expressing the need for us to eat whole foods, and I'm definitely into that. So whole foods are there to support us, and looking at the yin and yang within those whole foods. So there's this understanding of we've got these extremes, we need to balance them out by, from extreme yin to extreme yang. And then once we try, things come a bit more stable and steady in the center, how can we encourage ourselves to find more balance rather than sticking with those extremes? I think for this to work in the long term, people need to know that a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet for the long term is not going to sustain them in the best health that is possible. And, I don't know if there's studies to support that point of view. That is just my opinion on the topic, and I would love to know what you think. So thank you so much for watching. This video turned out to be a bit longer than I anticipated, but I wanted to explore this idea of how we can improve our mental health. What is the current thinking around this? And we get the example of Dr. Georgia Ede sharing about her approach, and then putting that macrobiotic lens on it and exploring the aspects of yin and yang as a way of finding that balance, and then fine-tuning that balance once we get to a certain point. Perhaps the benefits stop improving. The person gets to a point and they can't progress further because there's this imbalance now happening the other way. So we want to find that level and then fine-tune it using appropriate methodology, using the principles of yin and yang to understand our lives in a more holistic way. So it's not just the diet. Diet plays a massive role in that process, but it is not the only thing. All right, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.